To the extent that we live our lives in a manner that is consistent with the truth in our heart, we thrive.
Welcome to the Meyer Clinics podcast, and you just heard a quote from one of your hosts, Dr. Lisa Day. Join our licensed clinical professionals from various backgrounds as they discuss fascinating mental health topics with a wide range of guests. Meyer Clinics is a Christian counseling organization with multiple clinics nationwide dedicated to treating the whole person, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Welcome to our listening family. We thank you for joining us. Hi, everyone. Kristen Sananta-Walker here with Dr. Lisa Day. Hey, Lisa.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here.
We are doing the Meyer Clinics podcast, and wow, do we have a topic for you listeners. We really, really do. And we're going to do this show probably in several parts, not just two shows, because there's just a lot to talk about, a lot to talk about. So, Lisa, you want to go ahead and share what we're going to talk about today?
Oh, for sure. So what we'll talk about today is growing up with a narcissistic mother, which is a heated topic, but unfortunately a very much overlooked dynamic or challenge, for many of folks out there. And so I'm excited to share this with you. And I know that we've got lots of information and lots of examples that we can talk about. So thank you, Kristen, for doing the show with me.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I grew up with a narcissistic mother, and I know that that's a generational thing. And in our family, that it's been going on with the women, especially for generations. And we can talk about what that looks like a little bit further in the show, but I know it firsthand. And I want to make sure, listeners, that I want you to understand that I'm 49 years old. I am not blaming my mother in any way for the choices I've made in my life, or how my life has turned out, or the problems that I've invited in and stoked like a fire. This is not about blaming my mother, but I've had a lot of therapy about this. And I did blame her and was very angry with her once I figured out what I was dealing with as an adult. And I needed to feel those things. So I just want to make sure that you understand nothing that I'm going to say in this podcast is to try to hurt her or to be disrespectful or to say, oh, all my problems are my mommy's fault. That's not what this is about. Just wanted to lay that out before we get started. So Lisa, please take it from there.
And I think that is so grace-filled, Kristen, because, we'll talk about here before we launch of what, a healthy mothering and nurturing looks like. But when we walk through the podcast, it's easy for us to speak about it with a lot of emotion, because when we grow up with a narcissistic mother, the injuries are deep, profound, and long-lasting. And one thing I always want both our listeners and our client population to look at is that narcissistic mothers, though we'll speak at them with emotion, are narcissistic because of their developmental injuries and because of what they grew up with.
The trauma they suffered, yes.
They didn't come into this world with the intent to be vicious or malicious. Though their injuries are far sweeping, we want to understand that they are struggling with what I absolutely own, identify, encourage people to acknowledge the mental illness of narcissistic personality disorder is profound. But no, we don't want to blame them. We want to look at the effect it has on us so that we can get excited about the growing and healing that absolutely is necessary in growing up with a mom like that. But
Yeah.
before we launch into that, I just want us to, briefly review, what is a healthy mom. And when I think of a healthy mom, absolutely, moms sit on the hierarchy of life. They have the most power in our life. They're the most powerful individual when we come into the world. Our mom
Yes,
is our life.
because they birthed us. We
Yeah.
were in their body. Our fathers are important too, but I mean, seriously, we were not in our father's womb. Like we were connected to our mothers, and we started with enmeshment. And for some of us, that enmeshment turns into something ugly when you're out of the womb. But we start with enmeshment, which is something that makes this journey even more difficult. But sorry, Lisa, go ahead.
No, yes, no, but even inclusive in that is that, when we come into the world, mom's number one job, as you hold a child, if you're division, holding a child to your chest, next to your chest and nurturing your child through the nutritional support, mom's number one job is to protect us, to contain our chaos, and to hold protect safety for us. As we grow, technically, ideally, she would teach us about confidence and about believing in ourselves. She would encourage our development. She would see our unique gifts, qualities, aspirations, and talents. She would be the one that believes in us, the one we go to.
Yes.
Most importantly, what we get from mom in a healthy mothering relationship is unconditional love and acceptance. It's where we feel the love of the Lord. It's where we feel the pure love that our good, our bad, our right, our wrong, we are accepted, we are nurtured, we are who we are. So, when we think about narcissistic moms, boy, we take a right angle or 360 degrees, 180, however it is, in the opposite direction. But so when we think of healthy mothering, we think of nurturing, we think of validation, we think of containment of chaos, we think of protection, we think of the nurturing dynamics that are natural to a healthy mom.
Yeah, absolutely. And how we learn, boy, I have one child, he's 29, and thank goodness I had a boy because I don't know how badly I would have messed up a girl, really, truly. I could have carried on this generational stuff. I'm really grateful. Thank you, God, that
without
gave
healing
me a boy.
Yes, well, without healing, I tell folks that we love with the love with which we have been loved.
Yes.
And I know that's a bit of a tongue twister, but we learn to love in the manner with which we've been loved. And we'll talk about here in this series the importance of heading on a healing path, because without proper healing, unfortunately, we are at risk of becoming a narcissistic mother.
Absolutely. And it doesn't mean that we have to stay there where it becomes a disorder. And I'm sure you'll explain, the difference there. But what's been interesting for me is I have behaved absolutely in extremely narcissistic ways, meaning my development of the trauma that happened in my life. I had to go to therapy and work through, and but I grew. I didn't stay there. I didn't stay trapped as a 5-year-old in an adult body. So while I had my son very young at 18 and had no business having a child at that age, and he did suffer some of my own narcissistic, unhealthy behavior because I worked on myself and I continue to grow and I continue to evolve as an adult because I don't have a personality disorder. That has helped repair some of the things that he went through as a child with me that weren't healthy, where I wasn't a healthy mother. So we never stop being a parent, but that's the difference. I don't have a personality disorder. I can evolve and grow. My mother does, and she can't and she won't.
Well, Kristen, how about if we launch from there, from your personal experience? What was it like? How would you know or to describe that you grew up with a narcissistic mother?
Well, I didn't discover this until I was 47. And I've been in intense therapy at different times in my life because I was sexually abused by my father, also a narcissist and sociopath. So I got it in both barrels. I didn't know that my mother had so much control over the narrative of my entire life and in my mind and the way I felt about myself that, well, it was easier, and I put big quotes around that, to deal with the sexual abuse. It was horrific to deal with coming to terms with my mother having this personality disorder. That was worse than the sexual abuse. I'd go through the sexual abuse again than go through what I went through learning this. And how I learned it was doing so many shows with people like you, Lisa, that know what this personality disorder is, including Dr. Paul Meyer. And I think I did all the shows I've done, all the radio shows I've done, and interviewed so many people all over the globe that are psychologists, psychiatrists, neuroscientists, because I had to figure out, what does a healthy person behave like? What does a healthy mother look like? What did I go through? What was reality? How can I rewrite my story so it's mine and not my mother's? Did that sort of answer your question, or did I go off on a tangent?
No, that's so helpful. But I think what is interesting is that when we're raised by a narcissistic mother, we don't notice it. We grow up and narcissistic mothers can be lawyers and doctors and heads of churches,
homemakers,
society. They look like they've got it together. They're collected. They drive nice cars. They play bridge. They play golf. They play tennis. Right. They're socialites. And to the public, they often look like superstars, superwomen.
My mother has applied for sainthood a long time ago, and she's still working on it. So, yeah.
Well, so they're oftentimes the wow factor parent. You look at them and you think, oh my golly, that person is gorgeous, and what a life they have. Yeah. But then we slowly learn, or when we're on the receiving end of it, we realize that this is a person who has a huge sense of self, a huge need for admiration, no sense of empathy for any of our hurts or our struggles, that they are grandiose. They believe that they're one of the most important people that walks into the restaurant or into the club.
Their furniture and their belongings, and this is a one side effect. It's not all narcissistic mothers that do this, but with mine, her china and her furniture, she's had longer than any relationship in her life, and those objects that are about how she looks on the outside are more important than personal relationships, including with her only daughter.
Well, the relationship with the only daughter is of no importance at all. Absolutely. The only thing that's important is how the narcissistic mother feels. And your feelings as a child are going to be disregarded. Your feelings, your thoughts, your aspirations, your academic goals, your career goals, none of those matter. They only matter to the extent that they make me, your mom, look good.
Good.
Yeah.
Let me give you a really good example, listeners, because what I've learned in doing shows about this subject is it's great to hear the clinical side. It's so great. But details of what someone else went through sort of help you rebuild those neural pathways, because you're like, oh, there's examples. So here's a very short example. And Lisa, are you okay if I share this?
Oh, for sure. Yes, it's so helpful.
So this is very recent. I worked for 7 years with a therapy dog, and I think you saw this on Facebook, Lisa, because you wrote a really. And I mean, he has a commendation from the hospital psych ward that this dog was a working companion, and we did 7 years of volunteer work with autistic kids and people in psych wards, and that was me doing that work. It wasn't my mother. It was me doing that work. And he just passed away at 14. He had a long, wonderful life. He just passed away a few days ago. And I'm not going to talk more about that because I'll cry and we don't need to go there. But here's what a narcissistic mother does. Okay. So there's no relationship. I'm at a place of no contact with my mother, and I've been there for just over a year. I am not a part of her life. And that is for my emotional health. I may decide later that I will, but right now it is healthier for me to have no contact with her whatsoever. Okay.
Which is a healthy boundary, healthy boundary. Yeah.
So I just found out from a friend yesterday because I've blocked my mother from all my social media, everything. I just found out from a friend yesterday that my mother posted pictures of me with my dog and went on and on and on about her amazing daughter that did all this incredible work, volunteering and blah, 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 and then wrote as if we are actually having a loving relationship right now. And I'm just like, what?
And while that is so disturbing, Kristen, that is so clinically classic all the time, that when they're out in public, you need to be talking to me, lifting me up. I'm the best soccer mom. I'm the PTA, and my daughter. And yet there's zero understanding of who you are and how you operate.
Yep.
It's awful.
And you didn't do that work. I did, Mom.
All of it. And then there's a strange dichotomy that while she has great pride, in the work that you've done with your dog and the volunteering and all that you've created, there's also this underlining vicious vein with many narcissistic mothers of competition. And I would share
envy.
Oh my golly, I will share an example of a young woman who, when she was in high school, a beautiful, wonderful, graceful woman who was voted best looking, and a very humble woman growing up with a very narcissistic mother, and came home excited, to share that with her mother. And her mother promptly took her in the bathroom to wash her face. Only the choice of soap was Comet, and she scrubbed the skin off her face, which we think, how can these things go on? How can a mother go scrub the skin off the face of her daughter? But the jealousy and envy that the daughter would get any attention that would be bigger than the mother is horrific. And then the abuse follows. So the stories that can happen, and, hearing that your mom's going to take all the credit for what a great daughter I've raised, is a great reflection of me, really. I say, people often say, what does a narcissistic mother look like? And I say, well, one of two things. She can have high heels, be impeccably dressed, and running around going, me, me, me. Or she has horns and wears a warning sign that says, careful, she bites. I say,
yeah.
Be careful.
Those things are interchangeable. My mother can be extremely lovely to the housekeepers that come in to clean her home. And then 5 seconds earlier, literally, I think I saw her shapeshift into some kind of ghoul or minion from hell to rip me apart about something as an adult. So that's what we're talking about here, is that at the same time.
Or rip the house cleaner apart. What I observe is that publicly they're nice, they're kind, they're supportive, but then behind their back, they'll tear them apart. They'll break them into pieces. Yeah, that's very much what is observed on the outside is not necessarily what you see on the inside. A superficial image. I belong to the Chevy Chase Country Club, is a big one. Name dropping. I'm a consultant to the President of the United States. We get a lot of, you have a conversation with someone about where they went on vacation, and it's all me, 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 build me, build me, build me. And you find it when you've not been raised by a narcissist, you can see it. But I think this is one of the insidious challenges for someone like yourself, Kristen, is that this was normal. It was normal for us to not be seen. And this is the tragedy, which we'll talk about more as we go through this series, is that oftentimes women and men don't get help because they see their mother as an all-powerful, impressive, successful woman, and that I just never measured up.
Oh,
I just
you just spoke my life. Yep.
And
I have never felt anything but scapegoated and never good enough for her, not up to her standards. And those are her words that she uses all the time since I was 47 years old. That is pretty damn sad.
That's 47 years of complete rejection. That you live simply for her.
Yep.
Which is so awful. The levels of abuse that people don't, realize when you grow up, because they look, society sees this strong together woman, and they don't see that kind of rejection behind the walls. It's awful. That lack of empathy, what I often will see, and I don't know if you experience this, and usually people will try all forms, during their development, but the lack of empathy when you're going through pain and hardship, the choice of the child and the adult child is either the fight, flight, or freeze. I can fight her, but anybody who's grown up with a narcissistic mother knows that's not a very good thing to do.
Because you're punished for it later, boy. Yeah.
Through silent treatment or through
Mm-hmm.
Nitpicking, or you can try to fleet or flight, meaning create distance. But the only time that individuals growing up with a narcissist have success there is when there's an alignment. So if several children, withdraw, or several children and a parent withdraw, or you can freeze, so we have the fight, the flight, the freeze, and the freeze is really when we adopt the persona of what the narcissist wants us to be. So we might be a tomboy, but we agree to dress in a pink dress and patent leather shoes and go to the club for lunch.
Yeah, you just described, I was a tomboy, and at 9, I finally just acquiesced and put on a dress. And my mom was so happy. And I remember that feeling that my friends have said whenever my mother would get on the phone with me for business meetings, because I made her my CFO for a while of my company, which that's a whole other horrid enmeshment story. But anyway.
We're quite compliant.
Oh, God. Yeah. And I was a galvanized weapon for her too. So we'll talk about that. But when I put that dress on, that was the beginning of me completely feeling like I'm disappearing. I'm disappearing.
Oh boy, not seen.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not like I don't like dresses. And it doesn't matter. Many people, whatever. We're not talking about clothing, but I was such a tomboy. I didn't want frilly things. I wanted a bunk bed and, skateboards. And my mom wanted me to have, Barbie, frilly, lacy, and that was so not me. And so when I finally gave in to make her happy, the thing about it that was so difficult as a child was that I felt my soul start to close in on itself. And no child should ever have to do that in order to appease their parent.
Well, mom's role is to grow your unique, gifts, talents, interests, and none of them are at all fostered or encouraged. They're just controlled, attacked, disregarded. I wonder, Kristen, if you can speak at all from a personal experience. We talk a whole lot about, with narcissistic moms, the control.
Mm-hmm.
And lots of people will say, well, how would you let someone control you like that? Why would you be compliant? And I say there's many forms of control. We've got guilt control, we've got shame, we've got guilt. You owe me. I've done all of these things for you, and you owe me. You need to come to this event. They shame us. You would be nothing without me. You'd be nothing without being a part of this family. They negative comparison. Why don't you go to this prep school like your brother? Why don't you dress like your sister? Unreasonable pressure. I expect you to marry an Ivy League graduate. That other reward and punishment. If you don't go to law school, then I'm not going to pay for it. I wonder if you experienced any of those, Kristen.
Everything that you said, I'm like, bing, memory, bing, memory, bing, memory. Yeah, every single thing. Do you want me to give one example?
Sure.
Okay. So my mother, her most happy partner that she ever had in her life, and she's had many, she's switched back and forth between men and women my whole life, which was very confusing for me because I had to hide that she was in a relationship with a woman when I was a young child. And as a child, to me, that was normal because I didn't know any different, but I was supposed to hide it and be ashamed about it. But for my mother, it's not about what her sexuality is. It's about who is giving her the most attention and what we call narcissistic supply, who she can bleed dry and who will pay her the most attention. So anyway, so all of these relationships that she had, her happiest one was with my stepfather, and he was a wonderful, wonderful man, extremely codependent, but a wonderful, happy person. And the thing that he gave her that was so glorious to her was that he was a doctor.
Oh.
And so she got to be Dr. something something. And she just, his children were all college educated and just, put up on this pedestal with my mother. Education is the weapon of choice. And there's a part of me that purposely didn't go to college ever just to
hold your own identity, your own space.
Exactly.
Or I can exert my own power. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Healthy move, my friend. Healthy move.
Not to mention I was completely in trauma. Couldn't sit. I had ADHD undiagnosed, which we've done shows about, and I couldn't sit through a class. But it was also like up yours, Mom. It was like my way of having independence. So my mother, for a party, she created a PowerPoint presentation that was to play on a loop for this celebration that would have my stepfather's kids, who are, my stepbrothers and sisters. And she created this PowerPoint to run on a computer, and she couldn't figure out how to get it all aligned. And so she asked me to fix it. So I'm going through this PowerPoint, which is supposed to be, family pictures. It's just supposed to be a family celebration thing. It's supposed to be pictures of different cool things that people can stop and go, oh yeah, I remember that when we ran around in the backyard with a hose. Look at that picture, that kind of thing.
Lifting her up.
Yeah, in the PowerPoint, she has the LinkedIn profile resumes of all the academic credentials of all of my stepfather's children, and even some of their cousins that weren't even at this party, listed on the PowerPoint. And I mean, we're talking all of their academic credentials.
Hi, this is Dr. Paul Meier, founder of the national chain of Meier Clinics. I've often told you about how people just like you are getting the healing that they need from emotional issues like depression, anxiety, anger problems, and relational problems. We wanted to share with you Mickey's experience at our day program and how it has affected his life.
The Meier Clinics has been a real blessing to me. Dr. Meier told me that people get well here, and my life has been completely changed. I have been symptom-free for 3 years, and I'd recommend it to anybody that really wants to overcome an emotional problem of any kind.
Mickey's story is like so many others that we receive. It's an encouragement to us, and we hope it will also be an encouragement to you to call us to get the emotional help that you've needed. Please call toll-free 888-7-CLINIC to be connected to the Meier Clinic program nearest you. That's 1-888-7-CLINIC, or go to meierclinics.com. That's www.meierclinics.com.
She didn't have my son, her only grandchild, in the PowerPoint. She didn't have my ex-husband, and she had a little teeny blurb about me with my radio show. And yet all this other stuff. And the fact that she would do this and that's what was important to her. All of his kids laughed at this and thought my mother was the most shallow person ever for those particular things. Some of them believe that she is a martyred saint because that's what she puts out there. But the fact that she would do that, and that's what was important, and then ask me to edit it.
Oh, no.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
I had to edit it.
Sick. That's pathological.
And that happened when I was 46. So I did the dutiful daughter thing and I edited it, and I sat there going, this is utterly ridiculous. His kids are going to be like, why is this here? Our cousin that we never see that lives in Australia is on here. Like, what is this? And I had to edit it. Otherwise, boy, I don't even want to know what she would have done if I hadn't edited it for her.
But, that's an interesting point. I mean, where do you start? I mean, that's an example of how all of those accolades, all of those degrees make me a better person. But then to ask you to do it, the disregard, the lack of empathy, lack of concern, lack of impact it would have on you. But even the stronger part that jumps out at me, Kristen, is that even as a 47-year-old adult, the inability, and in this case, I would say the inability, because it's what I've observed in my own mother, the inability to say no, Mom, I'm not going to edit that.
Yeah.
I cannot be a part of that. Hence your current boundary with her is to have no contact. Because what people don't realize is that they'll say, oh, why don't you just say no? That was crazy. You don't want to do it. It's dangerous emotionally, mentally, intellectually, financially.
Yes.
Spiritually.
Financially.
There's no ability. No is not an option for many narcissistic mothers. And so my heart aches. I can't even imagine what that was like for you. I can't even imagine.
When I started saying no to her, because she married her 5th partner, who is a woman, after my stepfather passed away, it was such a lie, and there was so much triangulation going on, and all the games that she played when I was a kid. Like my stepfather helped me deal with her because he was so lovely. So she could, and I wasn't around her at that time. So I could be a part of her image, which is that she is this saint. Okay, that's what she's going for, is to be considered this saintly, giving woman. I could buy into that because he made her look good, and I already had the tape running in my head of the way that the perfect way for someone to live their life is the way my mother lives her life, and I'm never going to measure up. So I could buy that. But once she got with this woman who is this deranged, also a narcissist, and it's just so too many things to talk about. But once that happened, I woke up. All I can say is that I woke up and I started to see the truth and how I'd been used and how I had been treated. And I just started seeing the truth. And that's what made me finally say, I will not participate in this anymore.
What's powerful in that, and we'll talk about this more when we talk about how to heal, from growing up with a narcissistic mom, is that on the 5th marriage, at the age where you were, it sounds to me like you took a moment to stop and check in with me. What do I think? What do I think about what's happening here? Whereas as a narcissistic child raised from a narcissist, you're not ever allowed to. And so you don't even think to stop and say, what are my thoughts? What are my feelings? And in that instance, it sounds like you said, what do I think? And then we're able to say, this life is not right for me. This life is not right for me. But the other thing that comes up that I think is really important, and again, we'll talk about this more when we talk about healing from growing up in this dynamic, is the confusion that despite the fact that a narcissistic mom is controlling and is entitled, can be downright vicious and abusive, she's our mom. And we are drawn as a child to love her. And in the healing process, it's confusing because we love, and some narcissistic moms can have moments of incredible nurturing.
Oh, absolutely.
They really can. And so it's very confusing that those times that she did hold us and did tuck us in, or we, broke our leg or had polio, but then only to turn around and just rip us to pieces, literally. But it's important to know that we can love these people, but then absolutely decide to have the boundary but being around them is not something that's good for me. It provokes me in a manner that there is no way out. There's no way out.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
I wonder if you experienced, I have another example of where we see the control of a narcissistic mother, controlling everything, your thoughts, your feelings, your desires, really, what you're going to study, where you're going to school, whether you get school is for a lot of people, but you would be better as a housewife. But another area where I've seen it is in choosing a mate, meaning your friends are never good enough and the mate is never good enough. And my observation, this was a personal observation, is that if narcissistic mom does not approve of your mate, she'll punish you for your entire life. Yeah, it's not just until marriage. It may be passive aggressive comments such as he's never, good enough, or he doesn't look very good. He doesn't make enough money. He doesn't have a good enough education, to downright direct and consistent disapproval. Even I've seen it go to the point where she would encourage an affair. People don't understand the lengths that moms will go to control, and throughout the life, not just in that one, choice of what college you want to go to or what person you want to date.
I'll say this about the love of my life, who I'm not married to anymore, but he's my absolute best friend, and we both have one child, and that's our child together. We're coming up on what would have been our 30-year wedding anniversary if we'd stayed married. We don't live together, but like I said, we're best friends. And I will say that here's the fascinating thing. I've had one consistent partner that I've been through absolute hell with, because he was raised the same way I was. There's a reason we ran to each other. And that, looking at that and seeing us go through absolute hell, plus have this negative everything you said from my mother, second-class citizens, we absolutely believe that about ourselves anyway, and then that I would marry him made that even worse. I mean, that went on. But to go through all the things that we went through together and to come out as these best friends who absolutely care and love our son together, is a testament to how great we are.
Absolutely.
And then you look at the example of like my mother, who always said that we were horrible and pathetic and lower than in all her different ways, who's been through relationship after relationship after. It's amazing to me when you do wake up and you look at the facts of the circumstances and you go, wow, I'm the one who's maintained.
Well, I chuckle as I'm listening to you, Kristen, because I have my family member, my grandmother. I lost track. It's either 5 or 6. Maybe there was an annulment in there. It's just who has the ability to attach in a healthy relationship, right? And so when we look at narcissistic moms and we look at the effect it has on us, kind of bringing that back to how we opened up as a healthy mom. Oftentimes people will look at, when they get married, they'll quote their vows and they'll look at 1 Corinthians. But I think it's helpful to go through and just look at what we hear as the very common descriptors of love. That we know that love is patient, love is kind. This is the funny one: does not envy, does not parade itself and is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in immoral or gross behavior, rejoices in truth, bears all things, and endures all things. I mean, I think that when we go through the list as we've been talking, it's diametrically opposed. That the narcissistic mom diametrically presents as opposed to what we present as what we know love to be. And what impact, when we look at, okay, so we talk about, we've grown up with a narcissistic mom, and we talked about how lots of people don't find healing because they don't, while they see it as painful, they don't necessarily see it as abnormal. They see themselves as defective. As a child, you're trained to please your mother. You're certainly not going to take her on because she's dangerous. We're constantly criticized, and there's constant demands, and a whole lot of psychological whiplash. But this damages us, and I wonder, you've addressed some of those things, Kristen, of where it's damaged you, and certainly we know that self-love, self-trust, understanding who we are, from the inside out, confidence, courage, boundaries. What are some things that you might add to that you found that you have struggled in your own journey?
Oh, well, boundaries. I mean, my goodness, I have had horrible attachment issues with people. I was so used to whenever my mother, I had a very big family with a lot of cousins, and I was very close to my grandmother, which is my mother's mother. And these people were all a huge part of my life up until I was 14. And then I was told by my mother, because of her issues with her family, some extremely valid and painful, and part of why she developmentally stopped at the age of 5, probably. So valid issues, but she took what happened to me being molested, and she ended up telling me that the reason why our family, all my cousins and my aunts and uncles that I were part of my growing up, didn't want anything to do with me because they didn't believe that I was molested.
Oh my golly.
And so they just disappeared from my life. They
So
just
you were
disappeared.
rejected and then abandoned.
Yes, and I can't, and I don't think they didn't want to. My cousins and stuff, they were kids too, so they didn't have any control, but they didn't want to be disconnected because we've reached out later in life, and they've been like, God, we missed you and blah blah blah. But I, boy, did that cause me to be very to have some attachment disorders that I absolutely I still have to work with about that, where I just don't allow myself to attach, because who knows when somebody's going to be gone.
Well, and truly in therapy, I teach, to the extent that we need something from somebody, they have power in our life.
Mm-hmm.
And we need mom to be loving and kind and supportive and validating. And as a young child, an interesting thing happens in my observation is that if that need leaves us, or leads us, if you will, to pain. So if I need you to validate you and validate me, and all you do is criticize me, because I can't turn off my feelings, often I learn to turn off my needs. My need for attention and affection and time and validation, acknowledgement, because all of those needs are met with pain, with rejection, with abandonment, I turn them off. And absolutely, turning off that need is going to interfere with attachment. But the other thing that is just horrific in that story that you share, Kristen, is that it taught you not to open up your mouth, didn't it? At least,
it did. It did, but it also, I was breech, and so I came out feet first, and I don't know if that means anything, but there is a big part of me that is so core. It just is such a core thing of, I will not lose my identity. Like, it is so core. I think because my mother just gave up her identity, or became the identity of whoever her partner was. It was an example for me, unknowingly, to just like, I am going to have a voice. I am going to, I'm here. And some ways that manifested unhealthfully with weight, because I think that I needed to gain weight to be like, I'm here. See, I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. I'm even bigger here. I've had to work on that in therapy. But it also made me speak about sexual abuse. At 16, I was up speaking about it. So even though I spoke and I've done all this advocacy my whole life, my voice was quelched in so many other ways with her. So you can have this cognitive dissonance, which you'll have to explain what that is, since you're the therapist. But I've lived in a state of cognitive dissonance forever, because of those diametrically opposed things always going on within my need to be an individual, and yet I better be quiet about what's really going on in the house.
Well, what's incredible to hear in that story too, though, Kristen, is your ability to nurture yourself. That I am going to be heard. I am going to live my life. I am going to say no. I am going to seek therapy. I am going to heal. I believe in me. And, not many people are able to do that without a support network and without having those nurturing needs met, in healthy, safe relationships. But the healing path and process, as you know, it's lifelong, and because mom sits on that hierarchy of life, she's in our mind. We hear her all the time. And, we have to say, no, that's not me. My truth is such and so. And the ingrained, the multiple levels of injury are huge. And, many people can grow up and they either go through this phase, some people stay there, or some people enter into the level of therapy that you have and find freedom. But, the damage results in people-pleasing behaviors. I'm not going, let's just keep the peace. Let's not upset anybody. I'm going to disregard my needs.
Anytime there's any confrontation.
Yeah, well, and I'm going to detach from my needs and wants because they're met with rejection, at least historically. And, it really... And I like how you zoned in on boundaries, because I think that if there's, two main factors, and again, we'll talk about this more as we go through the series, but really being able to go in and find our truth, our truth with regard to what we feel, what we think, our attitudes, our thoughts, our goals, our aspirations. I mean, that's a huge and lifelong journey. But
Yeah.
then through the utilization of the skills of boundaries, of knowing how to bring and learning how to bring that truth into a relationship, the combination of that is skill-wise, leads to freedom. But people don't understand that, when you grow up not knowing who you are because you were not only not encouraged, but you were flat out rejected, it's difficult to see the good in yourself, to see yourself as worthy or lovable. It's you're hypervigilant to the things around you, and difficult to find a sense of direction or to even know what you think about something. And many people are struggling even to find words. Hey, do you feel like going with us, to the Bahamas? You just kind of deer in the headlights. I don't know what I feel. I've never been allowed to.
Yeah, it's really profound too when you do wake up and you go through what is enormously painful. I mean, you're already in pain, but when you decide to take the journey that you're going to wake up, that's a whole other level of pain, but it's so worth it because the other side of that is really what bliss is all about. But being able to go back and rewrite the narrative of your life from your own voice and rewrite how you speak to yourself from your own voice is so powerful, so life-giving, and the wisdom that you gain from knowing about this kind of behavior from people. Oh man, it's a game changer. I have been able to run my business better. I've been able to get out of relationships with people that were narcissistic, extreme manipulators, and do it in a way that doesn't trigger their need for revenge. Because boy, are these people vengeful. I've learned so much on how to live a more peaceful, fulfilling life, because I know how to deal with these people. I was raised in it.
Well, and I know we'll talk more about this next time, but I know that, sometimes people feel overwhelmed because it's their entire development and then into their adulthood. But I just can't emphasize enough that we have skills base, and it's like picking up, do I need a straight head or a Phillips head? I mean, there are specific skills that we use to move through it. And oftentimes when we grow up with a mother like this, our world has become so unsafe and so unpredictable that we just seek safety. So we just look for a safe relationship that's no longer going to, or a lifestyle that's going to no longer hurt us, only to continue to struggle with the feeling of worthlessness and failure. And so I'm so excited, to do, our further work on what does moving forward look like? And not only do we learn skills to heal with our own stuff, but I jokingly say I can smell a narcissist from a mile away. I say run, don't walk from the person who has it all together, the wow factor, and who's charming, because those are our first indicators that we're dealing with a narcissist. So, I mean, I think what I want our listeners to know is that while it's a devastating childhood, it really is. And the confusing things is these moms, they look like they have it all together, and society-wise, they're impressive. And yet the abuse that takes place at home for years and into, as you're talking about here, into your adulthood is so profound. But through the use of skills, dual process, if you will, people get ticked off when I say this. We have to grieve that she's not the mother that I needed her to be. This is the one that really... You have
to allow yourself to get really angry. Like you really do. I mean, really angry.
Well, and the part that gets the pillow thrown at my head, as I say, is then we need to forgive. And what I emphasize with folks is that parallel process, or that dual process of grieving and forgiving, does not in any way, shape, or form pardon, excuse, or explain the narcissistic mom's behavior. But through that process and the skills that we'll talk about when we talk about this further, we can live a life that's, as you clearly demonstrate and speak of, that is abundant, that where your nurturing needs are met, that you operate from the inside out, that you are authentic, you're in touch with your truth, you can communicate your truth, you can engage, you can attach. So it's exciting that there is healing once we understand the magnitude of the injury.
Yeah, and now I understand why all of my really close girlfriends, which are many, and from all different age ranges, are the most awesome, healthy mothers ever.
That's a good. You've picked them.
I do. I handpick them. I mean, I watch them with their kids, and I'm like, wow, that's okay. That's what that looks. Oh, wow. And of course, I purposely picked that. I mean, and the wound of this is always there. Okay, so I don't want anyone to think that the wound goes away. No, it's your mom. It's always there. But, and, again, like we've said, we'll talk about this next time, but I want to kind of close us a little bit with this thought. The wound is there, but what you do with that wound is probably your soul's purpose in life.
Well, you come back to be thankful for it in a very distorted fashion, because to heal and grow and have the skills that you have, the level, magnitude, and depth of attachment and quality living you can have, you would have gotten no other way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm producing a podcast now with a mother and daughter who went through a lot of what we're talking about. And so for me, and it's painful to hear how close they are. And I thought, but that's what I do. I take what happened and I turn it into something that is going to be helpful for a lot of people. And that's a really great quality. And I learned that from out of the wound of this.
And Kristen, your mom is going to be sitting on the other side saying, look at what a great job I did. My daughter teaches so many people.
Oh, yeah. Of course,
realistic expectations.
There's nothing you can do about that.
Yeah.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much. This is obviously, I got a lot to say about this, but this is such a great, this is going to be such a great series for a lot of people.
I so appreciate your examples and, authentic sharing, because the depth of injury, the depth of pain, so many people suffer in silence. And the more we can talk about the impact of a narcissistic mother or father, or sometimes mother and father, you got the full meal deal, as we call it. The more we can educate people and help them find healing, which really one word resonates in my mind, freedom, then we've done what we need to do.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Lisa Day with Meyer Clinics, thank you so much. We will be back for our next show talking about the healing of this wound, and we'll, I'm sure, do more. But listeners, we want to say thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Meyer Clinics podcast. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Kristen.
We hope you enjoyed this podcast. Tune in next time for another engaging discussion on relevant mental health topics. If you have any questions about Meyer Clinics, please visit our website at meyerclinics.com. That's MEIER clinics.com, or call us at 888-7-CLINIC. Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or any of your favorite podcast apps. And please note that we are a member of and produced by Mental Health News Radio Network, MHNRnetwork.com.